Well, good afternoon. Paleo Joe here, sitting in my little tiny office, prep lab, whatever I've got. I I just finished my last fossil dig, family fossil dig for the year, going up to Alpena. But this year I also went to Rogers City a couple times to do some digging there. Took some people up, and I'm going to mention again some of the fossils that I found in Rogers City and some of the interesting environmental aspects of what we found. Several years ago, I went there and I found a location. It's basically the spoils pile full of clay from the Rogers City limestone, and we find lots of corals in there. And the evidence that I saw showed us that there was a lot of storm activity. The storms would come through, they'd churn up the ocean, they would hit the land and wash mud, slurry, all sorts of stuff back into the lagoons, and kill the creatures and bury them in mud and that slurry. But I also discovered that a lot of the fossils we found were knocked over by a storm surge, but then were not totally killed or destroyed. They began to recover again. One of the fossils I found was this guy right here. This is a horn coral that originally was growing, well, straight up like this. And this is the way it's supposed to be oriented in the ocean. And something happened. A storm surge came by. For whatever reason, the coral was knocked over like this, and it started growing again from the top right there. What that shows me is the water was fairly shallow, because corals only grow in warm, shallow, saltwater tropical seas where they can get sunlight, because the sunlight is beneficial to the algae that's a symbiotic creature with the coral. So again, for some reason the coral was knocked over, and then it did not die. It began to regenerate and grow right straight back up to the surface of the ocean. So we see that there are some environmental aspects there. This year I found this little guy right here. This is again a horn coral, and it shows that he started growing at the bottom, and as he's growing up, the conditions were, yeah, they were okay, but something happened, and all of a sudden the conditions got much better, because right about at this point here, he really started to accelerate his growth. So either the water temperature was great, the food was readily accessible, the salinity of the water was perfect, and all of a sudden he just took off and started growing really well. So again, you can see the environmental conditions of the area also affect the growth of these fossils. And the same kind of thing right here. This guy is fairly small, growing up really small from the base, but then as he started getting up a little bit higher, conditions must have improved, and he was doing quite well. The other thing that I found were corals like this. This is a coral called Hexagonaria, and what's interesting about this one is, again, that storm surge that came over and brought back in some of that slurry into the ocean kind of buried up this coral. There are some corals I have that are literally half and half. The slurry came in, buried half of them, that part died, and the rest of it just continued to grow. Well, in this case, there's a depression right in the middle, right in here, where something was inside there, dirt, sand, mud, whatever. This depression filled in, killed whatever was there, but the rest of the coral head continued to grow. And right here you can see that the coral is starting to grow back over where the hole is. It's kind of difficult to see here, but you can see right here the coral is starting to go back over where the hole was. But again, right here where the hole is, there must have been some dirt, mud, something deposited on top of that caused this part to die, but the rest of the coral around it continued to grow and survive. So that's just some of the economic environmental conditions we see back then. And again, the location up in Rogers City really demonstrates that quite well. Getting ready to start working in the prep lab. Fall is coming. I've got a bunch of rock shows we're going to. A lot of school programs coming up. I'm doing programs with rock clubs, doing some lectures here and there. But I'm going to be spending a lot of time this year in the prep lab trying to prep up all the fossils that I found over the year. So y'all have fun. Hopefully this was a little bit entertaining for you to learn a little bit about our ancient tropical oceans here in Michigan and some of the environmental conditions that we had back then. Y'all take care.